Awesome. Hello, everyone. It's Giselle here from Kids Yoga Stories, and I'm super excited to have my dear friend and colleague, Lani from Full of Joy Yoga today. So good to see you. Thanks for taking the time, Lani.
Thank you, Giselle. So happy to be with you.
Awesome. So why I brought you here, Lani, today is because you've got this incredible background, 25 years teaching yoga, and you are, I think, an expert on finding fun. Because what we've heard from our community over and over again, right, is that people are paying out of pocket for everything they do. Teachers, caregivers, everyone is paying, pediatric therapists, everyone's paying out of pocket. And what people don't realize is how easy it is to get funds, to get sponsored, right? And I'd love to talk to you about that so we can give people some ideas to realize that they don't have to pay out of pocket. So that's one of those obstacles, Lani, that we hear is people are saying they can't get started with teaching yoga and mindfulness because they don't have the money. Is this something you hear too in your community?
Oh yeah, all the time. Yep.
Right. And so your background is particularly interesting because you're similarly, you taught first grade for 5 years, right? You moved to San Francisco. You started Full of Joy Yoga there where no one was doing that work then. Yes. And then for 25 years, you worked your way through San Francisco. You're now in Connecticut and you've create these relationships, right? So I'd love to hear, a little bit about how you got started and sort of why did you get started in the first place?
So I started my career first in preschool in Boston while I was getting my master's in early childhood education. And then I was looking for an elementary school job. And I was also a practicing yogi. And this was the mid to late 90s. And I got a job teaching first grade in New York City in Coney Island, 5 years there. And it was a very challenging teaching experience for me. Teaching first grade at that time I had no parent in the classroom, a lot of kids being evaluated for special needs. And the only outlet I had was to do yoga with them in my classroom. And I was doing it and I saw that it was working. I would get an extra 5-10 minutes of them sitting and learning, and they loved it. These kids in one of my centers, we were able to have centers in first grade in the late 90s now. I mean, they might have centers, but not the same way. So I had a yoga center and I had some books and some cards, the early versions of cards, and the kids would do it. They would pretend to be me. And I knew there was something to it. So I looked to go get certified to teach kids yoga. I did a few trainings and knew that there was something about it. I got my 200-hour also. And I started an after-school program in my school for yoga. I knew that this was more than just a hobby or something to add to my classroom. And then I met who was going to be my future husband at the time. And I knew I was leaving teaching. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go and, go move to San Francisco with him. So I moved to San Francisco. And right then, as I was moving, I got an email from somebody who said, somebody told me that you're a kids yoga teacher and we're looking for a kids yoga teacher in our preschool. And I still to this day do not know who was that connector that told this random person. But then I started teaching kids yoga in San Francisco, and that was it. It was in a preschool, and I fell in love with it. It was the greatest thing, and knew that this was what I wanted to do. So I started my own business out there, Full of Joy Yoga. Nobody else really was doing it. And I started getting, because I was originally a preschool teacher, I started getting jobs in the preschools.
Right. Yeah, because that's a natural progression, right?
Yes.
We've seen that in our community as well. If we're a preschool teacher, early childhood, then also that helps that barrier to get into schools. They know that you've got the background working with children, right?
And the thing is, with preschools, that makes it so much easier too, is the kids are there.
Right.
They're paying you.
Right.
You don't have to market as much. You don't have to find the kids to come take your class and find the money. Preschools have the money, the kids are there, and that was kind of a no-brainer for getting started.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so then there was probably a time, right? I imagine that you got to a point where you didn't have the funding or a school couldn't afford you and they wanted you. So tell us about a time like that where you didn't have the funding, you had to search for it.
So, mornings are the time when you teach preschool. So I'd be teaching mornings, and then I'm looking for more work because I was trying to make this my full-time career. So you had to find after school work, and that would be the after school programs. And that's where like finding different ways to fund an after school program would start. You'd have to start figuring out like how the schools were going to fund it. Sometimes parents paid, sometimes PTOs paid, sometimes there was funds in the school that would cover that. And so like that was where you needed to start getting a little more creative in approaching after school programs that maybe weren't doing yoga, and then you had to kind of get creative with that. But my goal was to try to get yoga into the school day because I knew how beneficial it was when I was a teacher.
Right.
And that's where you really need to find the funds, because we know what they all say, this is the limitation, is the time and the money.
Right.
And so if you want to bring this into the school day, like, how are you going to make this happen? And in San Francisco, I remember there being some programs that were like maybe health insurance programs. There were some programs like maybe Kaiser at the time was funding it. There were like, and a few of the schools had like grant programs. And so they had these funds that were going to fund it. And that was San Francisco. I mean, that was unusual, but at the time, like that was in the early 2000s, and that was happening.
Yeah, great. And then when you moved to Connecticut here, we've got an extra, your animals are, I love it. Mm-hmm. We were just talking before, Lani's got a cat in the background, there's a bearded dragon,
and
it's
a
all
kid.
happening. And a child.
No. There we go. Hi. Okay, bye, Zephyr.
It's all good.
Working
the way we are.
We're summer.
Perfectly perfect. We show up as we are. I love it. Amazing. Okay, so tell me, so you were in Connecticut though. Let's talk about maybe one experience you've had. We've talked about, you talked about PTA, so the Parents Teacher Association, and you didn't write that grant, did you? You had someone help you.
So when I moved to Connecticut, I started really trying to get my program into the school day. Yeah. And so there were many different ways that I was getting creative with getting, so at my son's school, I went through the PTA.
Right.
And they put my program, I had to write a proposal, they put it into their budget.
Right.
And so for maybe like 4 or 5 years, they didn't even take it out of the budget. So that was brilliant. So I got it into the budget the first year. And then it was a continuous line in their PTA budget. So getting through into the PTA is a great start, because they have, the PTA raises money, however they raise money, and then they have these funds, and then they're looking to spend it on incredible programs like kids yoga.
Right.
So that was one way. The United Way here in Connecticut, in New Haven, where I live, was also funding programs. And so that was how I initially got into the school day in a few of the schools, was through this United Way program that they were doing called Boost at the time. And so they had the funds, and I didn't have to write anything at that time. But then when the money ran out, that was when the creativity really had to start. And we would go through community foundation, so that in different cities, there's a community foundation always looking to spend money. There's tons of money out there in community foundation of people who, from their own generosity, they set up these funds and they want to fund really great programs. So in your cities, like, look for the community foundation grants. And that was how one of my schools was funded. What else? So
you've got not-for-profits you're talking about, are you talking about parent teacher associations or professional development or parent public foundation? There's different organizations within the school districts, right? You're talking about healthcare companies, you're talking about possibly Kaiser, right?
And
community
foundation.
And
then like the federal grant program.
Federal grants,
those grants, they came from the CARES Act, a lot of it. And so right now there's like, and Giselle, you knew a few like that they were like continuing on. So there was like 3 years of these grants because of the pandemic. So in your public schools, they should definitely have money for SEL.
Yes.
That they want to spend on our programs.
Right.
And I've even heard stories on NPR where they're like, this is what we're looking for. And so we are very needed right now. Right. And there's money for our programs.
Right. And I've heard too, specifically, if you're looking for the ESSER funds, the ESSER, as Lani was saying, there's a 1, 2, and 3. The 1 has been spent, the 2 is just, and the 3 hasn't even been opened yet. And there was a timeline. So I think it's in 4 years or something where it's a cutoff, 2026 or something. But yeah, to get in there. And I've heard the focus is about if you focus on learning loss. So like you said, SEL, and also the fact that if there's has there been any learning loss in your classroom, and you can apply through that. That could be a focus. Yeah.
Yes. And then there's also yoga nonprofits out there that are looking to fund us, people like us going into schools. And you might need to take their training, which is okay. I did that with a program called United We Own locally here. They're in New York and Connecticut. And I did their training for that's trauma informed. It was amazing. And then they funded classes that I would do in a homeless shelter and one of the schools. So lots.
So it's not just your services too, but you also want to be thinking about materials, right? Because you've not only bought props and mats and all your supplies, but you've also created curriculum. So you create your own Mindful Breaks curriculum. So all that takes time, right? And all the printing that goes involved with it. So it's not just raising funds for you going in and your time, but also materials.
Right. So like all the work you do on your program, plus the work when you're teaching in your program. So I actually just had a grant from one of the high schools in my town pay for me to go in, and then paid for my book, my card deck, and mats to give to the kids and the teachers. So like you can work in all your materials. I even will buy for teachers like Hoberman spheres and chimes and work that in, like all the things that I know that they're going to need to use in their classroom after I leave, because you want these programs to keep going when you're not there.
Right.
So you go in and you teach, and I'm expecting these teachers to continue to do some of the activities that I'm doing with the kids. And so they need the props. So it's really important that you can like work in the props that you bring in, for the teachers to get in. All teachers love free stuff.
So now, Lani,
because they deserve it.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm dying to know, after the 25 years of working on this and getting all the funding and doing all the work that you do, you've got to share with us a story about an impact on at least one child that wouldn't have been made possible had you not had the funding.
So, I mean, it always comes back to, and I think about one of the schools that I'm still going into today, and I started, oh my God, like years ago. Like I've been going in there maybe 7 or 8 years, one of the elementary schools in New Haven. And this amazing teacher, I have to give her a shout out, Janet Pepe, because she is really the teacher, the brilliant teacher who really got me to focus on what was going to help her students, her kindergarten students. So I kept coming in with my program, and these kids like loved everything I was doing, but they need the visuals. So I just remember her saying to me, like, you need, a poster, you need the cards. And I knew that once I started bringing in, and the kids they love looking through the cards, and they see kids that look like them, because it's very diverse and inclusive. They see kids like doing what I'm teaching, and then they can read it. And then, so just even the impact of having the teacher say, this is what we need to make your program better, and that I'm still going into these classrooms all these years later. And then I do feel like sometimes I'm a rock star going into these classrooms. Like 2 years, these last few years, I taught remote for a couple of the schools, this one particular one also. And when they let me finally come in person at the end of the school year, the kids just like, I've been on their smart board screen for 2 years. And now they're like, Miss Lani, you're here in person. Like they all ran over to me, like hugs, like, I mean, what is better than that, right? Like they just like, I know that not only was it making an impact on one kid, like they just like loved, they love it. They love the program. They love me. They love seeing me in person. And so just, it's so special. And as hard as our job is, and as hard as these teachers' job is, like when you impact those kids and you see that what you're doing for them. And I have kids telling me like, because we got them mats last year. So like, they're like, I do yoga with my mom with mat that I got from, so like, these kids who would never have had that opportunity otherwise.
Well, you're a perfect example that you walk the talk. You know, you are a yogi. You just like your lifestyle. You're always radiating, and you allude so much love. And I think that
Oh,
the way you present yoga and mindfulness, it's not, you know, your enthusiasm comes through in the work that you do, right? So you don't probably have issues as much as buy-in because you love the work, and of course they're going to love it because you love it, right?
yes.
So I
I
think
love it. And I love the kids. When kids know you love them,
right,
like they just know, like they can
yeah,
tell which adults love them and
right,
respect them
yeah,
and care about them.
I love it.
So, I mean, that's also why I love preschool the best, because I go in and they just all like run right over to me. I love it. I really love my work. I couldn't ask for to have chosen a better career for myself.
Oh, I love it. I love watching your journey. It's amazing. So
Thank
before
you.
we go today, I'd love to hear what is your favorite book that you're reading right now?
So I actually have to lower this because I just listened to a great book called The Book of Delights. Actually, let me make you bigger again. The Book of Delights, and it was awesome. I loved it so much, and that I like listened to it on Audible. So that one by Ross Gay, just listening to it was great. And then I just read, because I'm trying to do both, because I'm a book listener, and I'm trying to read books as well. And I just read The Change, and I really liked it for my book club that I'm in, and it was really good. And it's a good summer read.
Oh, good, The Change. So the Book of Delights, what was?
So it's a
what
book
made
of
that?
essays,
Okay, great.
and it's like this guy, he decided like every day to just kind of write with hand something that like just kind of sparked a little delight in him.
Ooh,
It's really great.
yeah, that's
It's
so
just
good.
it's like these little mini pep talks every day of just like things that he observed, and I loved it. It was
Oh,
so
I
I
love
did
that.
that for book club too. It was great. And listening to it, I loved because it was him.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I love it when the author reads their book.
Yeah, I love
From
that
their
because
book.
right now there's so much going on in the world, and for us to
Oh,
have these little
yes.
tidbits of hope and positivity, and
That's
you know,
why I loved it so
yeah,
much. And we all like that's why we chose it, because we're like, oh my God, just the news. There's so
yeah,
much. And
right,
it was just yeah, a little piece of hope.
awesome,
Positivity.
awesome. And then where can we find you, Lani? Because I want to make sure that everybody knows who you are and what you serve and how you serve and what you're offered. So how do we find you?
So fullofjoyyoga.com. I have a YouTube channel, so I'm trying to upload some more videos. I mean, I am not really selling too much these days. There's something, my card decks are like on my website, but I'm kind of more in the just teaching mode right now I'm not in the creating mode, but I could show you. This book came out this year, Yoga Games for Kids. You can get it on Amazon.
Oh, great.
So
Perfect.
this was an amazing creation I got to do with a publisher during the pandemic. So this was like
Awesome.
beyond my wildest dreams, getting to write a book like this.
Awesome.
But yeah, my website and my YouTube channel, I guess, are two really good places where you can find me. But I'm kind of laying low these days.
Yeah. And you're teacher trained too. You were doing some kids yoga teacher training. Are you doing that still?
Here and there, I've
Yeah.
done some virtual ones. I'm kind of on a little break, I guess, but I'm doing a workshop with the Child Training Institute at the JCC in San Francisco, which I've been working with them for years now. And it's a virtual, it's August 11th. So if you go on like Child Training Institute, it's like a 2-hour workshop I'll be doing in a few weeks.
Awesome. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. So appreciate you. I absolutely adore you. And if you've got any more questions or any ideas, we've also got to find funding on our blog. So I'll share that link below. Any questions you have, please don't hesitate to reach out at Giselle at kidsyogastories.com, and definitely check out Lani's website at fullofjoyyoga.com. Thanks so much, Lani.
Thank you, Giselle.
See you.
Bye.